The first thing I tasted was champagne. The second thing I tasted was my own blood. Wren's ring clipped my lip when he turned away from me. He didn't mean to hit me. That's what made it worse. He didn't even notice. Across the ballroom, Juno Hale was smiling at my mates like he already belonged to them, and all three of them were smiling back. I was still wearing the mating bracelet Theo gave me that morning. It was still warm. You have to understand how loud a room gets right before it goes silent. The Vance Winter Gala at the Aspen Lodge is the loudest room in Colorado every December. 300 alphas in black tie, packed matriarchs in diamonds older than the mountain, a string quartet playing something that sounded like it cost more than my apartment. Snow falling outside the glass walls in that slow, rich way snow only falls when you have money. I was standing near the fireplace with a glass I wasn't drinking, watching my three mates hold court on the other side of the room, and I was trying to remember how to breathe at altitude. Wren first. Always Wren first. Oldest of the triplets by 7 minutes and built like he resented every one of those seconds. Ink black hair, a jaw you could cut glass on, and eyes the color of Riverstone. The pack alpha. The face on every magazine that pretended to cover rising Western dynasties. My husband. Cassian second, the middle one. The softer one, if you didn't know better. Warm brown eyes, a mouth that always looked like it was about to apologize. Hands that had memorized every part of me. He was the one who cried when he marked me. He was the one who whispered, "You are the best thing that ever walked into my life," with his teeth in my throat. My husband, Theo third, the youngest by 9 minutes and the meanest by a mile. Pale green eyes, a laugh like breaking glass, a temper that kept the pack lawyers employed. He'd kissed my knuckles that morning and slid the bracelet onto my wrist and said, "Don't take it off tonight, baby. I want everyone to see." My husband, my three husbands, who were currently standing in a tight little triangle around a boy I had never met, and laughing at something he'd said, and none of them were looking for me. My name is Eli Marston. I'm 24. I'm an Omega. I was born in a double wide in Grand Junction to a single beta mother who taught 3rd grade and a father who left before I could hold a pencil. I put myself through the University of Colorado on scholarships in spite, and I met Wren Vance in a coffee shop in Boulder when I was 21, and I fell in love with all three of them before I knew what that was going to cost. I married them in the spring. All three, a real mating bond, the kind the old families still do, triple mark and everything. I have 3 scars on the back of my neck, and they still ache when the weather turns. I'm not weak. I want you to know that first before anything else. People look at me and see a small, pretty thing in a too expensive suit, and they decide the story for themselves. They're wrong. I've been carrying my own weight since I was 11. I've never begged for anything in my life, including the 3 men who put their teeth in me. The other thing you should know about me is that I can read objects. Psychometry. That's the clinical word for it. I put my hand on something and I feel what happened around it. Grief on a wedding ring, relief on a hospital door. My mother's kitchen knife tasted like love and exhaustion every time I dried it. Most Omegas present with a gift during their first heat. Mine came in at 14, and I've been careful about what I touch ever since. I had not touched my mate's hands in 3 weeks. I'd been telling myself it was nothing. The boy laughing with my husband's was named Juno Hale. I'd heard about him. Everyone had. He was the new soprano at the Pack Chapel, brought in from some Omega conservatory in Connecticut. And he had a voice that could gut you and a face that could finish the job. Pale, golden, doe-eyed. The kind of beautiful that makes a room rearrange itself. He was wearing a dove gray suit, the exact color of Cassian's eyes at dawn. Theo's hand was on the small of his back. I watched it for exactly long enough to understand what I was seeing, and then I watched it for 3 seconds more, because I wanted to be sure I wasn't inventing things again. Cassian said something into Juno's ear. Juno tilted his head back and laughed, and Wren, my Wren, who had not laughed at one of my jokes since October, smiled at that laugh like it was the first sunrise he'd ever seen. I set my champagne down on the mantel. My hand brushed the marble. The marble showed me Wren, 3 nights ago in this exact room, with his forehead pressed to Juno Hale's forehead, whispering, "I don't know how to tell him." I crossed the ballroom. I want to be clear about what I look like doing it, because it matters. I did not run. I did not cry. I kept my chin up and my shoulders back, and I smiled at Senator Okafor on the way past and complimented the pack matriarch on her earrings. And my heels did not miss a single beat of that quartet. My mother raised me to walk into hard rooms like I owned them. I owned this one. Legally, my name was on 2 of the deeds. Wren saw me coming. I watched it happen. I watched his face do 3 things in 1 second, in this order. Love, then guilt, then a door closing. By the time I was close enough to touch, his face was the magazine face, the pack alpha face. Eli, he said, not baby, not sweetheart, not the private word he'd had for me since Boulder. Eli. Juno Hale turned to look at me, and his eyes were the softest, saddest, kindest thing I had ever seen on another Omega. And that was the first moment I understood that he wasn't the villain of this story. He was just standing where I used to stand. Cassian wouldn't meet my eyes. Theo was still touching him. Honey, I said, sweet as the champagne still drying on my lip, introduce me to your friend. And all 3 of my husbands went very, very still. Snow kept falling outside the glass. The quartet kept playing. And somewhere under the music, under the altitude, under the bracelet Theo had told me not to take off, I heard the sound of my own life starting to crack. Wren moved first. He always did. Eli, this is Juno Hale. He's the new soloist at the chapel. Juno, this is my husband. My husband, singular, like he'd forgotten the other 2 were standing right there. Juno held out his hand, and I watched his fingers tremble, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I've heard so much about you, Juno said, and his voice was the voice they'd all been talking about, low and honeyed and a little hoarse, like he'd been crying in a bathroom 20 minutes before this and had pulled himself together on sheer discipline. Wren says you're the best thing that ever happened to their pack. Wren says a lot of things, I said, and I took Juno's hand. I took it on purpose. I wasn't going to. I had rules about strangers, rules I'd kept since I was 14, but I wanted to know. I wanted to know right now, in this ballroom, under these lights, with a mouthful of my own blood still drying on my tongue, exactly what my husbands had been doing while I slept alone 3 weeks in a row. Juno's hand was small and cold, and the second our palms met, I felt him. Not the affair. That's the first thing I want to tell you. I didn't feel a single moment of him touching any of my mates. I felt fear. I felt a boy sitting on the edge of a bathtub counting pills. I felt someone's voice on a phone telling him, if you don't do this, you will regret it for the rest of your short life. I felt a hand, not Theo's, not Cassian's, not Wren's, pressing down on the back of his neck until he said yes. I felt shame so thick it tasted like copper, and under the shame, a thing I recognized because I'd lived next to it my whole life. Hunger. Plain, animal. I haven't eaten in 2 days. Hunger. Juno Hale was terrified and he was starving, and someone was making him do this. I let go of his hand before I gave myself away. Charmed, I said, and I smiled at him like he was the most harmless creature in the world, and his eyes filled up with tears he was too well trained to spill. Theo's hand was still on his back. Theo. My Theo. The meanest of the 3, the one who'd promised me on our mating night, mouth against my stomach, that if anyone ever made me feel small, he'd make them feel smaller. Theo, whose hand I'd recognized with my eyes closed and my ears covered and my scent glands numbed out on suppressants. That hand was on another Omega's back in a public ballroom, and he had not moved it in the 90 seconds since I walked up. Baby, I said. Theo's head turned an inch, just an inch. Like he wasn't sure I was talking to him. I was smiling. I was still smiling. That's the thing about being raised poor and pretty and clever. You learn early that your face is a weapon, and you keep it sharpened even when your chest is caving in. Your hand, I said softly. It's going to get tired. Cassian made a small wreck sound. Theo did not move his hand. Wren stepped between us so smoothly it was almost beautiful. He'd been trained his whole life to manage rooms, and he was managing this one now, bending down to me, voice pitched for my ears only, one palm coming up to cradle my jaw the way he'd done 1,000 times in 1,000 kind of rooms. Eli, not here. His thumb brushed my cheek. And because my gift is a cruel little thing that does not care about my feelings, I felt his hand too. I felt him on our bed 2 nights ago, the bed I'd kissed him in on our mating night. I felt him sitting on the edge of it with his head in his hands. I felt him whisper, "To no one, I can't do this to him. I can't. I can't." And I felt him stand up anyway and put on his coat and walk out the door. Wren's thumb kept stroking my cheek like he loved me. Maybe he did. Psychometry doesn't tell you the truth of a heart. It tells you the truth of a moment. And in the moment he'd sat on our bed, my first husband had loved me enough to hate himself. It wasn't enough. "Take your hand off my face," I said, still smiling, "before I bite it." Wren's hand dropped. The room had started to notice. That's the part they don't warn you about. Growing up in a double wide watching rich people on television. When rich people fight, they do it in front of an audience, and the audience pretends not to watch and watches harder than they've ever watched anything. I could feel the weight of 300 stares landing softly on my shoulder blades. Juno Hale was shaking now. Actually shaking. He took a half step back from Theo, and Theo finally let his hand fall. Cassian found his voice. "Eli, sweetheart, let's go somewhere and talk. Please. Please let us explain." "Us." He said us. That was when I knew. Not the way you know something from evidence. The way you know something from scent. Cassian smelled like guilt and cedar, and a third note I hadn't been able to place for 3 weeks, and I placed it now, standing 2 feet from Juno Hale, and it was Juno. It was Juno's scent on my soft husband's skin, buried under cologne and shame, and it had been there every time Cassian had kissed me goodnight since Thanksgiving. My stomach turned over. I did not throw up. I want to be clear about that. I have never given a rich man the satisfaction of watching me fall apart in public, and I was not about to start with 3 of them. I picked up my champagne glass from the mantel. I looked at each of my husbands one at a time, and I took my time about it. Wren, who loved me enough to hate himself and not enough to tell me. Cassian, who smelled like another boy. Theo, whose hand had not moved. And then I looked at Juno, who was crying now, silently. The way people cry when they've learned that crying loud gets them hurt. "Sweetheart," I said to him, and I meant it. "Whatever they promised you, it isn't worth it." Juno's mouth opened. He did not get to answer, because Theo, my Theo, chose that exact second to put his arm around Juno's shoulders and say, loud enough for the nearest 40 people to hear, "Eli, stop making a scene. You're embarrassing him. Him, not me. Him." The quartet kept playing, the snow kept falling, and I lifted my champagne and I poured it, slow and neat and perfectly aimed, down the front of Theo Vance's $3,000 shirt. The silk went translucent before the glass was empty. Theo stopped breathing. I watched his chest stop moving under the wet shirt, and I watched his pale green eyes go from mean to murderous to something small and stunned. And for 1 second, 1 real second, my meanest husband looked like the boy who used to fall asleep on my collarbone. Then he reached for me. "Eli, what the hell?" He didn't get to finish. I sidestepped his hand, still smiling, and set the empty glass back on the mantel with both of us watching. I pressed the rim down until it made a soft, decisive sound against the marble. That sound carried further than anything I could have said. "It was flat anyway," I said. Cassian laughed. It came out before he could swallow it. A short, wet bark of a laugh, the laugh of a man who was coming apart in public, and he covered his mouth with his hand the instant it escaped. His eyes above his palm were wide and shining, and so guilty I could taste them from 2 feet away. I loved him for that laugh. I hated myself for loving him for it. Wren had gone white under his tan. He was doing the math in his head. The public math, the magazine math, 300 guests, 40 phones, the Vance name on every screen in Colorado by morning. I watched him become the pack alpha again, right in front of me. It happened in his shoulders first. "We are going upstairs," he said quietly. "All of us. Now." "Oh," I said. "Now you want to talk." "Eli." "Wren." I said his name the way he taught me to say it in Boulder. low, private, the way I'd said it on our wedding night, forehead to forehead, his breath in my mouth. I watched him flinch like I'd slapped him, and it was the most honest thing his face had done all evening. Juno made a tiny broken noise beside Theo. I turned to him because I was not done, because one of us in this circle of ruined men was a scared, starving boy, and I had not forgotten him. Juno, my voice softened without my permission. Sweetheart, listen to me. Whoever is making you do this, whatever they told you would happen if you didn't, we can fix it. I can fix it, okay? Not if you hear me. Juno's chin moved a fraction, less than a nod. More than nothing. Theo's hand tightened on his shoulder. Don't talk to him, Theo said. I looked at Theo. I let him see me look. Move your hand, I said, or I will move it for you, and you are not going to like how I do it. The ballroom had gone from pretending not to watch to openly staring. I could hear the quartet faltering, losing a beat, picking it up again out of sheer professional reflex. Someone near the ice sculpture was filming. Of course they were. Wren stepped in close again, close enough that I could smell him properly for the first time all night. Cold air and whiskey and the soap I'd picked out for him last winter, because he'd said it reminded him of my hair. My scent was still on my first husband. He'd been sleeping in my bed and thinking about leaving me. Please, he said, low. Don't do this here. I'm not the one doing it here, honey. Baby, don't. Please. And here is the thing about being mated to 3 alphas. Here is the cruel, embarrassing animal thing nobody warns you about when you sign the papers. Your body does not care what your brain knows. My body had been raised on their sense for 3 years. My body heard Wren Vance say, please, in that low, cracked mate voice, and it tried to lean toward him before my spine caught up. I caught myself. I locked my knees. I dug my nails into my own palm hard enough to leave half moons. My knuckles brushed my own skin, and I felt myself. Me, Eli Marston. 20 minutes ago, smoothing my hair in the coat check mirror, whispering to my own reflection, you look good. You are loved. Tonight is going to be fine. I wanted to reach back through the marble and shake that boy. I wanted to tell him to walk out the front door and never come back. I wanted to save him from the next 10 minutes of his life. I couldn't, so I became him instead. I became the Eli from 20 minutes ago, the one who still believed. Okay, I said brightly. Upstairs. Let's go have our little family meeting. Juno, come on, honey. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not. Juno's eyes flared. Pure panic. He doesn't need to come, Wren said quickly. Oh, I think he does. I held out my hand to Juno. Palm up. An invitation, not a grab. Every alpha in that triangle went tense at once. Cassian's breath hitched. Theo actually stepped in front of Juno, which was, frankly, the most telling thing any of them had done all night. My softest husband wouldn't look at me. My meanest one was shielding another Omega from me. And my Wren, my first, my pack alpha, looked at my outstretched hand like it was the barrel of a gun. Eli, he said, you don't know what you're asking. Then tell me, I said sweetly. Upstairs, with the boy. Unless there's a reason you don't want me to touch him again. Silence. It stretched. It kept stretching. Long enough for the quartet to finish one piece and start another. Long enough for me to count to 12 in my head and hear my own heartbeat on every number. Juno's small, cold fingers slipped into mine. He did it on his own. Nobody pushed him. He stepped out from behind Theo's body and he put his hand in mine, and he did not let go. And I felt a second flash of him, bright and clear as a photograph. A kitchen, a woman, older. Same doe eyes, a hospital bill on the counter, the woman coughing into a dish towel, a man in a dark coat standing at the door saying, all you have to do is what we tell you, and your mother gets her treatment. My grip tightened on Juno's hand. Upstairs, I said. My voice had gone soft. Dangerous soft. Mother at the school board soft. I didn't look at my husbands when I said it. I didn't have to. All 3 of them followed us. I led Juno across that ballroom with my chin up and my fingers laced through his, and I did not look at a single camera, and I did not look at a single alpha, and I did not look at the pack matriarch who was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Let them stare. Let them film. Let the whole state of Colorado wake up tomorrow and choke on their coffee. Juno's hand in mine was cold and wet. He was sweating through terror. I could feel it leaking out of him in little pulses every time his pulse kicked. Breathe, I told him, quiet under the music. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Do it with me. He did it with me. Bless him, he did it with me. All the way across that ballroom and up the wide staircase, while 3 pack alphas paced behind us like wolves that couldn't decide if they were being led or herded. The Vance Lodge has a study on the 2nd floor. Oak, leather, a moose that Theo's grandfather shot in 1962 and that I have personally hated since the day I moved in. Wren unlocked the door with his thumbprint and held it open for us without a word. I walked in first. I put Juno in the big leather chair by the fire, the one I used to read in when the house was too quiet. I crouched in front of him like he was one of my mother's 3rd graders, and I took both of his hands in mine. Juno, look at me. Are you hurt right now? Today, tonight? He shook his head. Are you hungry? His eyes filled. Okay, baby. Okay. We'll fix that too. Behind me, I heard the door shut. I heard the lock click. I heard 3 alphas breathing. I did not turn around. Cassian, I said, still watching Juno's face. There's a club sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup on the kitchen service list. Call down and order it for him. Extra pickles, he looks like a pickle boy. And a ginger ale because champagne on an empty stomach is how people pass out in leather chairs. Go. Silence. Then, so softly it almost broke me, Cassian said, Yes, baby. I heard him pick up the house phone. Yes, baby. He had not called me that in 3 weeks either. I had not realized how much I'd missed it until it landed on a different boy's dinner order. Theo, I said. Eli. Sit down. Eli. Theo, sit down. He sat. I didn't have to look. I heard the creak of the couch and the wet rustle of his ruined shirt, and I heard him exhale through his nose like a horse that had been corrected. Only then did I straighten up. Only then did I turn around. All 3 of them were in that room with me now. My 3 husbands, 3 alpha kings, and the whole lodge pretending this was a family matter instead of a dynasty cracking in half. Wren was leaning against the door with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Cassian was murmuring into the phone, shoulders bowed. Theo was on the couch with his legs spread and his elbows on his knees, champagne still dripping off his cuff onto the rug. I looked at them. I let them look at me. Before we do this, I said, I need each of you to hear something. Theo opened his mouth. Close it, I said. You lost talking privileges at the fireplace. His jaw snapped shut. Here is what is happening in this room right now. Juno is going to eat a sandwich. He is going to tell me at his own pace who is threatening his mother. We are going to solve that problem tonight because I am not leaving a scared Omega holding a bag for you 3 idiots. After that, Juno is going home, or to my mother's house in Grand Junction, or to whatever safe place he chooses, with a Vance lawyer and a Vance credit card and a pack guard on his door. Are we clear so far? Wren, low. Eli, are we clear? 3 nods. Even Theo. Good. Now the second thing. I walked to the center of the rug. I stood there in my heels on the spot where Theo and I had danced on New Year's Eve, and I looked at each of my husbands in turn. I know, okay? I already know. So we are not going to waste our evening with you 3 lying to my face. Cassian set the phone down very carefully. He turned. He looked at me, and his brown eyes were wet and wrecked, and he said, Eli, baby, please let me explain. What part? All of it. Start with the part where you kissed him. Cassian's mouth opened. No sound came out. I watched my softest husband try to find a word that didn't exist. Theo cut in, because Theo always cuts in. It wasn't like that. Oh, baby, I said. It's always like that. Eli, listen to me. Theo stood up. His wet shirt clung to him, and he looked, for the first time all night, like he was scared. Not of me. For me. You're walking into something you don't understand. Sit down. Please, just sit down and let us tell you. He took a step toward me. I did not move back. I have never moved back from Theo Vance in my life. But my body heard his voice drop into that register, that private alpha register he used to use against the side of my neck at 3 in the morning, and something in my knees went soft and traitorous, and I hated it. He saw. His eyes flickered down to my throat and back up, and I watched him notice my pulse, and I watched him decide not to weaponize it. And that small mercy undid me more than anything he'd done downstairs. "Don't," I said. "Eli, don't use that voice on me. Not tonight, not after." He stopped, one arm's length from me, close enough that I could feel his body heat through his shirt, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath and the champagne in his collar and underneath it, bitter and wrong and wrecked, the scent of panic. My meanest husband was panicking. Behind him, Wren had not moved from the door, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Cassian had come to stand by the couch with both hands pressed flat to his own stomach, like he was holding himself together from the outside. All three of my alphas, in one room, bracing. For me. Juno's voice was small and dry behind me, said, "Eli, they didn't sleep with me." I turned. He was sitting up straighter in the leather chair, 2 small red spots high on his cheeks, and his hands were twisted in his lap, and he was looking at me like he was about to confess to a murder. "What?" I said. "They didn't sleep with me." He swallowed. "I was supposed to make you think they did. That was the job." The fire cracked. A log settled. Somewhere downstairs the quartet changed songs. I felt the floor tilt 1 inch to the left. I did not fall. I have never fallen down in front of a Vance, and I was not starting tonight. I locked my right heel down into the rug, and I breathed through my nose, and I said, very calmly, "Say that again." Juno said it again. "They didn't sleep with me. I was supposed to make you think they did." The room went so quiet I could hear the ice in Theo's cuff dripping onto the floor. I looked at Wren. I looked at Cassian. I looked at Theo. Not one of them was looking at Juno. All 3 of them were looking at me, with that flat, still, braced face alphas wear when a plan they didn't sign off on blows up on a stranger's tongue. "Keep talking, baby," I said to Juno. "Everything you know, right now." Juno was shaking so hard the leather chair was shaking with him. But he was a boy who'd been raised to perform under spotlights, and when I put my hand on his knee and nodded, he found his stage voice. "A man came to our apartment in Hartford 6 weeks ago. My mom has stage 3. The insurance ran out in October. He said there was a family in Colorado that would pay everything. Treatment, rent, her meds for the rest of her life. All I had to do was come to Aspen, take a job at the chapel, and flirt with 3 alphas at a Winter Gala until their husband saw me do it." "Flirt," I said. "Touch, laugh, let them touch back in public. Wear the suit they sent me. Stand where they told me to stand." He swallowed. He said the husband was a bad person. He said the husband was stealing from the pack. He said if I made the husband leave, I would be saving a lot of people. My ears started ringing. I felt Wren move behind me, not toward me, toward Juno. 1 slow step. "Don't," I said without turning. Wren stopped. "Juno, the man. What did he look like?" "Tall, white, silver at the temples, kind eyes. He smelled like pine and old paper. He wore a ring on his left pinky, gold, square cut, with a wolf on it." Juno's voice was getting smaller. "He said his name was Uncle. He said everyone in the family called him that." The floor did not tilt this time. The floor dropped out. Because I knew that man. I knew him the way you know the person who taught you to drive. I knew him the way you know someone who has stood at the back of every holiday photograph you have ever taken. That ring, gold, square, wolf. I had held that ring in my hand on my mating day. I had felt it. Psychometry does not lie, and it had told me, that day this man loves you like you are his own. Uncle Hollis, Wren and Cassian, and Theo's father's brother. The man who had walked me down the aisle because my own father was nowhere on this planet. The man who had pressed that ring into my palm and closed my fingers over it and said, "Welcome home, son." I could not breathe. Cassian broke first. He broke the way he always breaks, quietly, shoulders caving, one hand coming up to cover his face. Oh God! Oh God, Eli! You knew, I said. My voice was somewhere else. It was in another room. It was in another year. You three knew Uncle was setting me up. You knew, and you let me walk into that ballroom. No, Wren said, sharp, immediate. No, Eli, look at me, look at me. I turned. My first husband had come off the door. He was 3 feet from me, fists still clenched and his eyes were wet. Wren does not cry. Wren has not cried in front of me since the night his mother died. He was crying now, silently, in that controlled, furious way, and he was not looking away. We knew something was coming. We did not know what. Hollis told me 2 weeks ago that he had proof you were laundering PAC money, real proof, numbers, accounts, signatures. He said he was going to present it to the council at the gala tonight, and that the only way to protect you was to make you leave the PAC before he did. Publicly, messily, so that when the evidence came out, it would look like heartbreak, not crime. He said it would save your life. So your plan, I said slowly, was to make me think you were cheating on me, in a ballroom, in front of 300 people, tonight. Wren's jaw worked. Yes, without asking me. Eli, without telling me. If we had told you, you would have tried to fight him. Baby, you would have walked into that room with your chin up and told Hollis Vance to go to hell, and he would have had you arrested before dessert. We were buying you a head start. We had a car. We had a passport. We had an apartment in Vancouver ready by morning. Theo's hand, I said, was on Juno's back for 90 seconds. Theo made a sound like I'd gutted him. I was trying to sell it, he whispered. I was trying to sell it hard enough that you would actually leave. Eli, baby, I have not slept in 9 days. I have not eaten a full meal in 6. I have been sitting in the dark on our bedroom floor every night with your pillow in my lap trying to figure out how to do this without losing you. And I could not figure it out, so I just did the loudest thing I could think of. Because if you left hating me, you would at least be alive. My eyes stung. I would not let them spill. Not yet. Cassian? I did not look at him. I could not. Your scent was on him. He hugged me, Cassian said thickly, in the chapel 3 days ago. I was leaving choir practice and he was crying in the pew, and I did not know who he was yet, and I sat down next to him and I held him while he cried, because that is what you would have done, baby. And I was trying to be you that day, because without you, I do not know how to be anything. A tear fell off my jaw onto the rug. I felt it hit. Why? I said. Why would Hollis do this? Why me? Silence. Then Wren said very softly, because the PAC money, the laundering, it's real, Eli. Someone in this family has been moving money through shell companies for 11 years. Millions. Hollis found the trail 6 months ago. I stared at him. You think it was me? No, baby. God, no. Wren's voice cracked in half. We think it was him. We think he's been stealing from the PAC for a decade, and he needs a body to pin it on before the audit hits in January. He picked you because you are not blood. He picked you because you are the easiest one of us to erase. I opened my mouth. I closed it. Somewhere downstairs, a bell rang. Dinner service. 300 people about to sit down to a meal I had helped plan. And upstairs in a locked oak study, I finally understood what the marble fireplace had been trying to tell me for 3 weeks. The sound of it went through me like a knife through butter. I stood there in the middle of that oak study with the fire popping and Juno shaking in the leather chair, and 3 alpha kings watching me the way men watch a bomb decide whether to go off. And I did the one thing none of them expected. I laughed. It was a small laugh, a tired laugh. The laugh of a boy from Grand Junction who had just been told that his husband's favorite uncle had been walking him like a lamb toward a butcher's door for 6 months. And the 3 alphas he had married had tried to save him by staging the worst breakup in Colorado history without asking his opinion first. You idiots, I said. Eli, Wren said, you beautiful, stupid, rich idiots. All 3 of you. My God. All 3 of you. Cassian made a sound that was halfway between a sob and a laugh. Theo's shoulders dropped 2 inches, like someone had cut a wire inside him. I walked over to the leather chair. I knelt in front of Juno again. I took his hands in both of mine gently, and I did not pry. I just let my palms rest on his cold ones, and I kept my voice soft. Sweetheart, I am not angry with you. None of us in this room are. Do you hear me? Juno nodded. Tears ran. Tell me your mom's name. Marin, he whispered. Marin Hale. Okay. I looked up over my shoulder without letting go of his hands. Cassian, call Dr. Ishikawa at Cedars. Tell him a woman named Marin Hale in Hartford, Connecticut needs a private jet to Denver tomorrow and a suite at the Oncology Center for as long as it takes. Tell him the Vance pack is covering it. Tell him if he says the word reimbursement, I will personally drive down to Cedars and bite him. Cassian was already dialing. Theo, get Callum on the phone. I want 2 guards on Juno tonight, not pack, outside hire, nobody who answers to Hollis. I want him in the guest cottage by the creek with the door locked and a sandwich in his hands before my soup gets cold. And Theo, yeah, baby, take off that shirt before you give yourself a rash. His breath hitched. Baby, I had not meant to say it. It fell out of me the way old prayers fall out of people at funerals, because he was mine, and his shirt was wet, and my mouth had spent 3 years knowing where he was in a room. He started unbuttoning with shaking hands. I turned back to Juno. You did not do anything wrong tonight. Do you hear me? You were a scared boy trying to save his mother, and my uncle put you on a board like a chess piece. That is not on you. Not a second of it. The only thing I need from you now is the truth. Everything. Dates, names, where you met him, what phone he called you on, every word he ever said about me. Can you do that? Yes, Juno whispered. Yes, yes, anything. Good boy. 2 more tears fell. I stood up. My knees popped. I was 24 years old and my knees had been popping since the betrayal started. Like even my joints had aged through the evening. Wren was right behind me when I turned. I had not heard him move. He was close enough that I could feel the heat off his chest through the front of my suit. And he had both hands held out, palms up, the way you hold them out to a dog that has been beaten, not reaching for me, asking. Can I, he said. His voice was wrecked. Can you what, Wren? Hold you, for 1 minute, before we go downstairs and ruin my uncle's night. Just one. I will not ask for anything else. I swear on my mother. He had never sworn on his mother to me before. Not once. Not even on our mating night. My throat closed. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I just lifted my arms an inch, the smallest possible invitation, and Wren Vance, the pack alpha of the Vance territory, the man on the magazine, collapsed into me. He folded. That is the only word for it. 6 feet 2 inches of alpha bone and muscle folded down around me, like I was the only thing holding him up, face pressed into the top of my hair, both arms locked across my back, and I felt him shake. I am so sorry, he said into my hair. Baby, I am so sorry. I would not have done it. I would not have. I was going to tell you in the car. I had a speech. I had a ring in my pocket, a new one. I wanted to ask you to marry us again, properly this time, in front of your mother. I was going to beg on the hood of a car in a parking lot in Utah. That was the plan. I closed my eyes. My hands had come up on their own. They were holding the back of his jacket. Behind me, Theo's wet shirt hit the floor. Cassian set his phone down. Jets in the air by dawn. I felt Cassian move into us. He did not ask. He just slid in at my side and wrapped one arm around both of us at once, and pressed his forehead to my temple, and breathed out against my cheek like he had been holding that breath since Thanksgiving. Theo came in last. Of course he did. Theo was always last and always loudest. He stepped in at my other side, bare chest and all, and fit his chin on the top of Cassian's shoulder, and his arm came around my waist from behind, and he said very quietly into my ear, Hi, baby. I had 3 alphas wrapped around me in a locked oak study on the 2nd floor of the Vance Lodge, and my lip was still split, and my bracelet was still warm, and I was still furious with all 3 of them, and I was still not forgiving them tonight. But I let them hold me for 60 seconds. I counted. I counted all the way to 60, and I felt my bond marks warm under the collar of my shirt for the first time in 3 weeks, and I felt Cassian's tears on my cheek and Theo's breath on my ear, and Wren's heartbeat under my palm. and I let myself remember for 60 seconds why I had said yes to all three of them in a courthouse in Boulder on a Tuesday. Then I stepped back. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady. "Here is what we are going to do to your uncle." And across the study by the leather chair, Juno Hale lifted his tear-stained face and smiled at me for the first time all night. And it was a very small smile and a very tired one. And he said, "Can I help?" I looked at Juno and my chest did a small, aching thing. 6 hours ago, this boy had been a weapon pointed at my marriage. Now he was asking for a job. "Yes, sweetheart, you can help. You are going to sit right here, eat your sandwich, and when I send for you, you are going to tell the people downstairs exactly what you told me. Word for word, ring, scent, kitchen, hospital bill. All of it. Can you do that?" Juno nodded. "Good boy. Theo, put a shirt on before my mother's spirit reaches up from Grand Junction and slaps you." Theo huffed out a weak laugh and shrugged into his jacket over his bare chest, and for a half second he looked like my Theo again. Before all of this, the boy who used to steal my hoodies and sleep with his nose in my hair. I turned for the door. Wren caught my wrist, gently, loose enough that I could have twisted free without trying. "Eli, wait. I need to tell you something else before we go down there." "Wren, we are on a clock. 2 seconds, please." Cassian had gone very still on my other side. Theo was already shaking his head, faintly at Wren. "Don't," Cassian whispered. "Not now. Now is the only time left." I looked up at my first husband. His riverstone eyes were doing something I had never seen them do. They were scared. Not scared of Hollis, not scared of losing the pack, scared of me. "Wren, say it." "There is a fourth account," he said quietly, "in the laundering trail, Hollis's trail, one of the shell companies. It has your name on it, baby. Eli Marston. Signature, address, the apartment you lived in Boulder before you met us. The account was opened 11 years ago." The fire popped. "I was 13 11 years ago," I said. "I know. I was in the 8th grade 11 years ago, in Grand Junction. Wren, I did not even have a bank account until freshman year of college." "I know, Eli. I know, we know. That is why we know it is him. Someone who had access to your name before we ever met you. Someone who knew you existed before you knew we did." His thumb stroked the inside of my wrist. "But baby, listen. That signature is a perfect match for your handwriting. Our forensics guy said it in writing. He said whoever forged it had access to your schoolwork, your diaries, your actual hand on actual paper, for years to practice against." I could not feel my feet, because there was only one person on earth who had ever held my childhood schoolwork. My mother. My mother, Beth Marston, 3rd grade teacher at Mesa View Elementary. My mother, who had kept every worksheet I ever turned in. My mother, who had a filing cabinet in our laundry room labeled ELI in her round, careful print. My mother, who had cried at my mating ceremony and pressed a gold pinky ring into Uncle Hollis Vance's hand and whispered something in his ear that I had been too happy to hear. A gold ring, square cut. Wolf. My ears started ringing. "Wren," I said, my voice came out thin. "Wren, describe the kind eyes." "Baby." Juno, describe the man. His eyes. Describe them for me. Right now." Juno looked up from his soup, startled. "Blue. Pale blue. Almost gray. One of them has a little brown spot in it, at the edge of the iris. Like a freckle." Cassian made a small broken sound, because Cassian had met my mother 6 times. Cassian had sat at my mother's kitchen table and eaten her meatloaf and admired her African violets, and he knew. He knew what color her eyes were. He knew about the little brown freckle in her left one, because he had told me once it looked like a secret. My mother had the same eyes. Exactly the same eyes. Hollis Vance did not have blue eyes. Hollis Vance had brown eyes. I had looked into Hollis Vance's brown eyes every Christmas for 3 years. "Oh," I said. The room did not tilt this time. The room went silent. A private, perfect, terrible silence. The kind of silence you only hear inside your own skull when the story you have told yourself about your life stops being true in a single breath. "Wren," I said, Describe Hollis's ring to me. His pinky ring. The one he gave me at the wedding. Gold, square. Wolf. On which hand? Right. I closed my eyes. The man who had come to Juno's apartment in Hartford wore the ring on his left pinky. Hollis Vance wore his on his right. It was not Hollis. It was someone wearing a ring that looked almost like his. Someone who had blue eyes with a freckle. Someone who had access to my childhood handwriting. Someone who had cried at my mating ceremony and whispered into an uncle's ear and pressed a ring into his palm. I felt my knees try to go. Theo caught me under one elbow without a word. Baby, he said very low. Breathe. In for 4. I could not breathe in for 4. I could barely breathe in for 1. Wren, I said. The account. The Boulder apartment. Was it the apartment on Pearl Street, above the bookstore, with the yellow door? Yes. That was my mother's apartment. Before I was born. She lived there when she was 19. She kept the lease under her maiden name for 20 years for sentimental reasons. She told me she could not bear to let it go. Cassian sat down on the couch. Not gracefully. He just folded onto it. Oh, Eli, he whispered. I had spent an entire ballroom and half a lock study being furious at 3 alphas for staging a betrayal without asking my permission. I had spent the last 20 minutes being furious at an uncle for plotting to frame me. I had spent my entire life being proud of a woman who had raised me alone on a teacher's salary in a double wide in Grand Junction, a woman who wore the same cardigan for 15 years, a woman who had cried when I told her I loved 3 alphas, and then cried harder when I told her I was going to marry them. My mother. My mother had been moving pack money through a shell company with my forged signature for 11 years. She had done it before she ever met Wren. She had done it when I was a child sitting at her kitchen table doing homework. She had been laundering for someone in the Vance family or around the Vance family, long enough to put a target on her own son's back when the audit got close. And when it got close enough, she had handed me, deliberately, on a silver wedding tray, to the exact family whose books she had been cooking, to clean up her mess. My own mother had married me off as bait. I did not cry. I want to be very clear about that. I did not cry because if I cried, I would not stop, and the dinner bell had rung and 300 people were downstairs. And I was not giving a performance of grief to my own mother's handler tonight. Not yet. I opened my eyes. Take me downstairs. I want to see what she sent me here to be. Nobody argued with me. Wren opened the door. Cassian gave Juno a soft word and a hand squeeze, and a promise that 2 guards were already in the hallway. Theo fell into step at my left shoulder without being asked. They flanked me down the carpeted hall like a pack for the first time in 3 weeks, and my bond marks warmed again under my collar. And I hated that my body remembered how to feel safe around them while my brain was still doing math on a dead marriage. We stopped at the top of the staircase. From up there, the ballroom looked like a jewel box. The quartet had moved into the dinner waltz. 300 of the richest people in the Mountain West were being seated at tables of 10, and somewhere in that glittering field of candlelight, my mother was sitting in her plum-colored dress with the pearl buttons, because I had put her on the flight list myself. I had flown her in first class from Grand Junction. I had picked her up at Aspen Airport that morning. She had kissed the scar on the back of my neck and said, "Look at you, baby. Look at the life you made." I pressed my palm flat to the banister. The banister showed me her. 3 hours ago, in this exact spot, my mother had stood with her hand where mine was, and she had whispered into thin air, "I am so sorry, Eli. I am so sorry. Please forgive me one day. Psychometry does not care about my feelings. It shows me what is there, and what was there in the varnished wood was a woman who knew exactly what she had done and was grieving it anyway." I took my hand off the banister. I hated that I still loved her. I hated that my first reaction to knowing she had sold me was to want to cover her with my own coat. "Plan," Wren said quietly at my ear. "Simple," I said. I go to her table, I sit down, I smile. I say hello to the DeWitt Alphas on her left and the Okafor matriarch on her right, and I pretend I am the same Eli who walked out of the coat check 90 minutes ago. "You 3 separate. Wren, you find Hollis and pull him into the blue parlor. Just you, nobody else. Cassian, You are with your mother tonight because she is going to need a son in the next 10 minutes. Theo, you stay on the edge of my eye line. If I touch my left earring, you come get me. If I touch my right, you come get my mother. Are we clear? 3 yeses. One more thing. I turned to Wren. If Hollis does have real evidence on her, if there is a file, tonight he gives it to me, not the council. My mother, my mess, me first. Wren's jaw flexed. I watched the pack alpha in him try to argue and the husband in him win. Yours first, he said. Good boy. Cassian made a small wet sound at that, because Cassian has always been weak for my good boy, and we were maybe going to laugh about that one day in a kitchen far from this one, if we survived the next 40 minutes. I walked down the staircase. I walked down it like I had walked up, chin up, heels steady, split lip covered with enough tint that the cameras would not notice until they zoomed in tomorrow. I smiled at Senator Okafor again, complimented her earrings again, because she was wearing different ones at dinner and it mattered. And she reached up and squeezed my hand as I passed, and she said, "Beautiful boy," in a way that made me think she already knew something. Table 4, center of the room. My mother's silver hair catching the chandelier like a halo. She saw me coming. Her whole face opened. "There he is," she said to the DeWitts. "There's my son." I slid into the empty chair beside her. I kissed her cheek. My lips touched her skin and I felt her. I felt her whole night. I felt her sitting in this chair for the last 40 minutes, bright and charming and praising me to strangers. And underneath all of it, I felt her counting the minutes until her son's life ended. "Mama," I said softly, "you look pretty tonight. You look handsome, baby. You always do. I need to ask you something. Anything. Did you marry me to the Vances to clean up something you did?" Her smile did not move. Not a muscle. Not a tell. That was the worst part. My mother, Beth Marston, 3rd grade teacher, maker of meatloaf, owner of 4 cardigans, looked me in the eye at a candlelit table in Aspen and held her smile perfectly steady while her son asked her if she had sold him. Under the table, her hand found mine. She squeezed it, and that squeeze was not a denial. "Not here, baby," she whispered, still smiling at the DeWitts. "Please, not at the table. I will tell you everything. I will. But not here." Behind her across the room, I saw Wren reach Hollis. I saw Hollis turn. I saw Hollis go pale. I saw my mother track that exchange out of the corner of her eye. And I saw her free hand tighten on her wine glass so hard the stem bent. Then she looked past me, past my shoulder. Her face did the smallest, quickest thing. Relief. I turned to follow her gaze. A man was crossing the ballroom toward our table. Tall, white, silver at the temples, pale blue eyes with a brown freckle in the left one. Kind eyes, left pinky ring, gold, square, wolf. He was not Hollis Vance. He was a man I had seen in exactly one photograph in my entire life. And that photograph lived at the bottom of my mother's jewelry box, under the rosary. And she had told me when I was 7, with tears in her voice, that the man in that picture had died in a car accident before I was born. I stood up. I stood up fast enough that my chair scraped, and 3 tables turned to look, and across the room, Theo was already moving. "Mama," I said. "Mama, who is that man?" She did not answer. She was looking at him like a woman looking at a lighthouse. He reached the table. He was smiling at me. The kind eyes, the real kind eyes, not the performance I had grown up believing in. He stopped 3 feet from me, and he said in a warm, low voice I had never heard in my life and somehow recognized in my bones, "Hello, Eli. I am so sorry it took this long. My name is Shepard Vance. I am your father." The quartet kept playing. The candles kept burning. My mother was crying silently into her napkin, and the man who had sent a scared boy from Hartford to burn down my marriage was standing 3 feet away from me, calling himself my father. And I realized all at once, in one terrible bright flash, that my mother had not been the villain tonight. She had been the hostage, and the man who had been blackmailing her, using my name, my signature, my apartment, my whole childhood, for 11 years, was standing in front of me with my own eyes and asking me to call him Dad. Across the room, Theo froze mid-step. I reached up slowly, without breaking eye contact with the man who was my father, and I touched my left earring. Theo unfroze. I did not see him cross the room. I did not have to. I felt him arrive beside me the way I always felt him arrive. A shift in the air, a warm band of scent, and his hand on my lower back for 1/2 second before he remembered he was not allowed. "Baby." "Not yet," I said. Quiet, calm. Somewhere inside my chest, a small cold door had shut, and I was speaking from the other side of it. "Go stand by my mother." Theo hesitated. "Theo." "Go." He went. Shepherd Vance, my father, watched him go with something soft in his blue eyes, something fond, like he was watching a son-in-law he had not been introduced to yet. The kindness on that face was the most terrifying kindness I had ever seen. "Eli," he said gently, "I know this is a lot. Don't." My voice did not shake. That was the part that scared me most. "Don't say my name like you know me. I have known you your whole life, son. You have watched me my whole life. That is different." Across the ballroom, Wren had Hollis by the elbow, both men going pale in real time as Hollis put the pieces together. Cassian was already moving toward our table at a pace that was not quite a run. 300 faces had begun to turn. The quartet, bless them, kept playing. They would keep playing if the building were on fire. My mother made a small, broken sound beside me. "Baby, baby, please. He said he would kill you. He said he had you watched at the university. He said if I ever told you he was alive, he would put you in the ground and make it look like a hiking accident. I did what he said. I did what he said for 11 years so you could live." I did not look at her. I could not. If I looked at her, the cold door in my chest would blow off its hinges, and I needed the door tonight. "Mama." "Steady. I believe you. Stay in your chair. Eat your dinner. We will talk tomorrow." "Eli." "Tomorrow, Mama." She sat down. She sat down because I told her to, with her hands folded in her lap and her shoulders trembling. And I was her son, and I was leaving her at that table, and I was going to survive it. I turned to Shepherd. I looked at my father for the first time in 24 years. I had his eyes, I had his mouth. I had the small freckle under my left iris that I had spent my whole life telling people was a beauty mark. He had given me my entire face, and then he had spent a decade using my name to hide his crimes, and he was smiling at me now like he expected me to be moved. "You sent Juno to break my marriage," I said. "I sent Juno," he said softly, "to get you out of a house that was about to collapse. Hollis found the money trail. Hollis was going to frame you tonight, Eli. I was trying to pull you out before they did. You were trying to pull me out because the trail leads to you, and I am the only person in this family who can read a wedding ring and know who touched it." His smile faltered. "Good. 11 years, Shepherd. 11 years you let my mother think you were going to hurt me. 11 years you let me grow up fatherless in a double wide. 11 years you used my signature, my apartment, my baby handwriting. And tonight, when the audit got close, you decided the cleanest fix was to set up a ballroom and let 3 men I love humiliate me in front of 300 people so I would run, so you could finish moving the last of the money while everyone was watching the scandal. Eli, you put your hand on a starving boy's shoulder in a kitchen in Hartford, and you told him my husbands were bad men. You made him believe saving his mother meant destroying mine. You are the reason a 20-year-old is sitting in a locked guest cottage eating a club sandwich and shaking. Son, I am not your son. My voice was still level. That was the thing. That was the thing I wanted my whole life to remember about this moment. I did not raise it. I did not have to. I am Beth Marston's son. I am the Vance pack's mate. I am Eli, and I am nobody's bait. Behind me, Wren had arrived. Cassian at my right. Theo already at my left. 3 alphas flanking their omega, and I felt their sense bracket me like a wall, and I let them, and I did not lean. Shepherd's blue eyes flickered over the 3 of them, calculating. His voice softened another notch. Eli, I made mistakes. I was young. I ran because I was scared. But I have been watching you, son. I have been watching you grow into a remarkable young man. And I have been waiting for the right moment to come home. And if you will let me explain properly, in private, without these boys, we can. Stop. He stopped. I felt the ballroom still. Forks going down. Conversations dying at tables closer than the ones I could see. I looked at my father and I said the thing I was going to remember saying for the rest of my life. You chose someone else a long time ago, so tonight I am choosing myself. Shepard's kind face cracked. Just once, a hairline fracture across the left cheekbone, a twitch at the mouth. The mask slipped 1 millimeter, and behind it I saw something smaller and meaner and much more familiar than a father. I turned to my husband's. Wren had tears on his face. Cassian was holding Theo's hand white-knuckled. Theo's jaw was shaking. You three, I said. Baby, Wren whispered, you staged the worst night of my life in a ballroom, without asking me. You decided my survival for me. You thought love meant deciding what I could handle. Eli, please. I am not asking you to apologize. I am not asking you to explain. I heard all of it upstairs. I believe all of it. And I am still leaving tonight. Cassian broke first. Of course, Cassian. He made a sound I had never heard a grown alpha make, and he reached for my hand, and I let him take it for 1 second, and I let him press my knuckles to his mouth, and I let him feel my pulse on his lips, and then I slid my fingers out of his. Eli, no. I love you, Cassian. That is not the question tonight. Theo grabbed for me next. His hand closed around my wrist, not hard, not to hold, just to keep. Baby, don't do this. We will fix it. We will fix every single piece of it. Just don't walk out that door, please. I looked at my meanest husband. I looked at his shaking mouth and his wet lashes, and I thought about his hand on Juno's back for 90 seconds, and the pillow on our bedroom floor, and the 3 scars at the back of my neck that still ached when the weather turned. Theo, let go. He let go. Wren was last. Wren did not reach for me. Wren, my pack alpha, my first husband, my riverstone, stood in front of me with tears running down his face and his hands open at his sides, palms up, the way you stand in front of a god you have offended. Don't, he said. Eli, please, I will do anything. Name it, anything. Find Juno's mother a doctor. Put Shepard somewhere he cannot reach my mother. Keep my mother safe. That is not what I meant. I know what you meant. The answer is no. I did not wait for him to ask it again. I did not wait for the ballroom to decide what to do with its forks. I turned my back on the 3 men I had married in a courthouse in Boulder on a Tuesday, and I turned my back on the father I had just met, and I turned my back on my mother who was weeping into her napkin, and I walked. Heels steady, chin up. The way my mother raised me to walk into hard rooms, Wren's voice cracked behind me. Eli, are you coming back? I did not turn around. I didn't come back to stay. I walked through 300 staring faces. I walked past the fireplace where the marble had shown me the truth. I walked past the coat check, past the boy from 90 minutes ago, whispering to his reflection, past the front doors out into the snow. Somewhere upstairs in a locked oak study, a sandwich was getting cold. Somewhere behind me, 3 alpha kings were breaking apart at the same time. Somewhere in the ballroom, a quartet was still playing. The snow was falling the way rich snow falls. Slow, rich, honest. I slid the mating bracelet off my wrist. I set it down on the stone step by the door where they would find it, and I walked out into the Aspen night, and I did not look back. And behind me, the door of the Vance lodge closed, soft and final, like a last breath. The Omega they betrayed never came back. Thank you for staying until the very end of this story. If this one stayed with you, the next one will hit even deeper. Don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now. The next story drops soon.